Midnight on Earth podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan.
Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we're here to bring you more knowledge, more light, and more love, and more amazing people that are here doing the work, the light workers. We have Makhosi Nejeser here today, the Royal Shaman, human potential, energetics coach, spiritual ascension master, and seven-figure entrepreneur. She has a lot going on. She's a manifester, and she has an amazing story. We're going to talk to her. But first, I need you to do something for me. Follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That is the address. You can follow me there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcasts. Click that button that connects us so you know exactly what's going on. When we bring incredible people on the show, you get that notification. Boom, you hit play. You're getting the download, literally. And of course, tell a friend, tell someone that you know that loves these type of podcasts. You know these people that would benefit from the high frequency information that we bring you. You know these people, bring them here. midnightonearth.com. Okay, so we're almost ready to talk to Makhosi, but I have to read her bio. So here we go. Makhosi Nejeser is a seven-figure entrepreneur, leader, and creator of the pioneering Energetics of Euphoria modality. Makhosi, the Royal Shaman, draws on African mystic wisdom and modern high-performance strategies to guide her clients to define freedom on their own terms to create abundance and sustainable wealth. Featured in major outlets like CNBC and the New York Times, Makhosi empowers driven, action-oriented leaders to rewrite society's outdated definitions of success and be empowered creators of their lives. Wow. With her results-focused approach, Makhosi delivers clients beyond basic manifestation practices into purposeful, aligned action to create more flow in life and business. Makhosi is dedicated to serving ambitious visionaries who are ready to step into their full potential and manifest their boldest visions of wealth and legacy into reality. And she's here with us today. Hello, Makhosi.
Jake, I'm super excited. I had to pause for a minute. I was like, who's that amazing person? I don't know who that is.
We have a similar frequency. We are similar frequency humans. I feel very connected to Egypt, ancient Egypt. We've talked on previous episodes how a lot of spiritual people feel like they are reincarnated Egyptians. And I feel that way about you. So here we are again. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, this time around. Been a few thousand years.
But it only went by like a second.
I know.
Right? Time, it's flexible, it's malleable, it's based on perception. I often think about ancient Egypt when people talk about it, and they talk about these huge ages of time. They're like, oh yeah, this person was pharaoh, this time his dynasty, this dynasty, it was like 3,000 years, whatever. Anyways, it's like, well, wait a second. All of 3,000 years and one of the most advanced, spiritually focused places on earth. Like, there were some incredible people there doing some incredible work. And here we are again.
Wonder why.
So tell me about your life story. Tell me how it all started for you.
Yeah. My life story really starts at a super young age. I would say probably like 2 years old or so. I started telling my mom about my last time here. And I would tell her all sorts of weird things, like how to mummify my body and how I died. I was kind of morbid. I'm still very morbid. It's part of what makes me very charismatic. And As a kid, I had so many spiritual experiences. I was seeing spirit animals at a young age. I picked up tarot at age 12. My friend's mom was Wiccan and she gifted me a deck. And I just started intuitively reading to make money at school.
And this was in middle school, which is kind of interesting. Like, this is very young. You were very much ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I was in 7th grade when I started reading tarot. I was never properly like trained, but just started reading. And everything in my life, like up until that point, I had like two versions of myself. I had this kind of spiritual old soul, very much the wise old teacher, but in a little body. But then I also had the very ambitious, go-getter, good student version of me. And that part of me was very driven because my mom was a single teen mom.
Right.
And I grew up in small town, Southern West Virginia, where I experienced racism a lot. And all I wanted to do was get out of there. And so I came across some statistics, probably like 5th grade, that talked about if you were, if your mom was a single mom and if you were of what ethnicity and et cetera, where you come from, that this was the expectation for your life. And those statistics kind of became my enemy. And I was like, I am not going to be like that. I'm not going to fall into those traps. And so I saw education as like my way out. So I really focused a lot up through college, really, a lot on achievement, on making things happen, on logic. And I studied the sciences and. But meanwhile, kind of behind closed doors, I was having these spiritual experiences. And those really came to a head when I turned 15, like a week before school started. I had this experience. I had just gotten back from spending a week with my best friend. And I'll never forget, it was a Friday the 13th that her mom called and let me know that she had been shot. And essentially she was on life support and her mother had to pull the plug.
Oh my God.
So this was right before school started. And the day that she pulled the plug, my best friend, Christy, appeared at the end of my bed. And she appeared just as solid as a person in the room. It wasn't like, how they say like ghost experiences, they're like see-through. No, she was like solid. Wow. And she appeared and told me, without speaking out loud, telepathically told me that she had come to let me know that she was okay and that she was moving on. And that experience really rocked me. I essentially spent a year in silence and just was I'm a very introspective person anyway. But that experience, I just was trying to understand all of the experiences I had up until that point. I had discounted. I thought, I'm just imaginative. Oh, these are just, I'm just seeing things out of the corner of my eye. And none of that is real. And then here I was having this very real experience. And
really quick, I just want to add for listeners, that tragic story is of your best friend. She was actually murdered by her boyfriend. I'm so sorry that happened. But then that experience, like you said, was this huge catalyst for you because you literally interacted with her consciousness while she had passed. But here she was talking with you, and that gave you absolute certainty that there was something else beyond this life. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, it shifted everything for me. And of course I ended up seeing a psychologist because I was so depressed with everything that was going on. And eventually they ended up putting me on medication because that experience kind of cracked me wide open. I started seeing different spirits after that. And before it was just kind of like spirit animals, but after her, I started seeing other types of spirits. And ultimately, I found myself, I kind of added this third version of myself. So I had the go-getter, ambitious achiever. I had this very spiritual self, but then I also, after her death, started becoming very ill and having a lot of freak, weird accidents.
Weird.
And so my health specifically catalyzed me going on this journey to like try and get well. And at the peak of my illness, which I now know is as the calling sickness, essentially is what we call it in shamanism, right? I was driven to heal my body, right? But that opened up so many other doors, because at the peak of my sickness, I was experiencing like deep bone pain all over my body. I would lose like 18 pounds in a month. I would be throwing up constantly for no reason.
Oh.
And then simultaneously, like in college and working full time.
And could you just please explain for our listeners what you mean by the calling sickness, just very briefly?
Yeah. So in shamanic cultures, it's pretty much understood that for certain types of people who have very specific type of work to do here, we can experience what's called the calling sickness. And this can manifest as certain mental challenges. It also manifests with very specific things happening in the body, but ultimately they are undiagnosable, essentially. So there isn't an actual cause for them that can be found on the 3D plane.
Sure.
Right. And so the calling sickness ultimately manifests to cause you to seek help, to cause you to seek a solution, and ultimately for you to align with the agreement that you made before you came onto this plane. Now, that's not the case for everyone. Not everyone has, a specific calling that requires that level of sickness or catalyst, right? But for many of us, we do experience these catalysts because for us, there's less wiggle room. I'll say it that way. There's less wiggle room for us to not be aligned with who we are here to be.
Right. So you were feeling that, and then you realized later as you were going through your life that calling sickness was happening, and you were on a quest to heal yourself, to find out what was going on, and then that opened you up. I didn't want to derail you there, but I really wanted to know more about that.
Yeah. So I would say that natural medicine was kind of like my gateway into alternative perspectives. And also simultaneously around that time in college, I was taking an origins class, which was essentially studying like the roots of all the major religions and spiritual systems, right? And I was having this revelation like, hey, there's something, guys, like we're all talking about the same thing and like creating war and famine and so many problems over who's right. And yet there's like this underlying universal truth. And how can no one see this, right?
Right.
But in my journey of like trying to get well, and then I make it through college. So by the way, fast forward to college, I ended up graduating. So this is like the most overachiever thing ever. My intention was to go to medical school. But I also, for my backup plan, graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees, one in business and one in marketing management. And I had this experience in my final couple years of school where I got married, had a very difficult experience with getting pregnant and then staying pregnant. I was on bed rest for 6 months of my pregnancy. And then I had a near-death experience after having my son, where I developed postpartum preeclampsia, and like I ended up in the hospital for 5 days, but spirit saved my life in that instance. And that experience specifically was like another level of catalyst, because I had returned home from an emergency C-section with my newborn baby, and a voice woke me up at 4:00 in the morning and said, get up, get dressed, go to the hospital. Very calm, very direct, a masculine voice that was definitely not my own. And I did it. I got up, I started getting dressed, and my husband was like, "What are you doing? It's 4 o'clock in the morning." And I said, "I don't know. Something's wrong. We need to go to the hospital." And he was like, "Okay, let's go." So we loaded up and made it to the hospital. And I had found out that they basically immediately rushed me back because my blood pressure was in like comatose levels. If I hadn't moved when I did, I would have been in a coma. And that paired with all of this challenge around getting and staying pregnant and then having this kind of miracle baby situation led me to very like blatantly second guess the path that I thought I wanted. Because now all of a sudden, all I wanted was to be with this little human. I wanted nothing but to be with him.
Just absolute infinite love, just pure love for your first child. It's just, I have children. I know that feeling. I of course, I'm on the male side. I didn't actually give birth, but that love, that feeling, I totally understand it. But really quick, that near-death experience you had, I mean, was that because of your pregnancy?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. It's pretty rare to develop preeclampsia after giving birth. Usually that comes before you give birth and then you have the baby and that resolves it actually, like having the baby solves the issue. But I developed it a couple days after giving birth, which was wild. And so I ended up having to spend 5 days in the hospital healing, trying to recover from that with a newborn baby, like trying to navigate my C-section, and I couldn't get out of bed. It was a lot, right? It was a lot.
I'm sure it sounds very overwhelming.
Yeah. Even worse, to make it, because overachiever problems, I had him 2 weeks before Thanksgiving break. So I had him, and then there was Thanksgiving break. Remember, I'm in my senior year of college, and I have one more semester left after giving birth to him. So after 3 weeks after this ordeal, I then go back to school to do my finals that are all pre-med classes, chemistry, physics, biology, all the labs, right? And then I had one final semester left before I was supposed to go off to med school. And in that final semester, I was like, you know what? There was just no way I could have envisioned myself going to med school, spending all of that time in school and studying, and then coming out and spending a gazillion hours in residency. And I was like, he's going to be 10 before I get to spend any time with him and actually know who he is as a person.
Your priorities shifted. You wanted to be with him.
Yeah, totally shifted. So I ended up not going to med school. And while all my friends went off to med school, and I was super at that point overqualified because I was magna cum laude with 2 degrees, and I had all sorts of experience by this point in management and marketing and sales. So I come out and I'm super overqualified for basically everything. So I end up working at Target.
Right.
As a manager.
Which is fine. We don't want to job shame people. Look, we're all out there doing things to make sure that we survive. And in that moment, you had that job. Now, I would say that is a job as a spiritual person. You know that that's a job within the matrix. It's like a corporate job, but you're also dealing with other humans and helping people. There's some good energy there. Go ahead.
There was lots of great things about honestly, there were lots of great things about it, the way that it was structured compared to other things.
Sure.
But ultimately, the structure of it still didn't give me the experience that I wanted, which was to be with my son, right? I was still dropping him off at daycare, and I would have to pick him up and so I ended up leaving Target and then getting into entrepreneurship. This was about a decade ago. And I ended up in the company that I was working with, skyrocketing to success in that company. And I then had another like catalyst moment because 9 months after leaving Target, now my son is probably like a year and a half or so. And here I am now I'm in the top 1% of my business, and I'm in direct sales. So when you're in those companies, you're getting mansion parties and cash bonuses and designer bags, and you're getting I had a free trip to Vegas, like all sorts of.
Yeah, sales makes everything happen. There's no business without sales. It's the most important job. In fact, or at least should be, the highest paid job.
Yeah, I mean, always. If you have sales skills, it's going to take you far. You can work in basically anything. But here I was, 23, 24 years old, with everything that society tells you is supposed to make you happy, right? I had the success, I had the husband, I had the fancy parties and free trips, and I had a miracle baby. And even though I loved what I was doing, I still felt like I was not in my calling. Like I was not aligned fully. I was not even using a fraction of my potential, which I couldn't really talk about it with people because they're like, are you kidding me? You're like living the life and you're talking about you want more. You're so greedy.
No, my God. See, that's a paradigm problem. These people have this programming issue where they see scarcity and lack. And then if you go for your dreams, your soul's purpose, that's somehow against success because you have the material things. It's all programming.
It is. And, but that was a moment that then I started asking the universe some very different questions. I like doubled down. I had a period where I like doubled down on Christianity. I read the Bible front to back twice. And I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. Lots of reasons why that wasn't for me. And I started asking the universe, like, who am I here to be? What am I like? Why am I here? Just show me and I'll follow. And that was when the wild signs and synchronicities came in, the intuition. I started following it instead of following my quote unquote plan. And that ultimately took me into the mystery schools of ancient Egypt. Some wild synchronicities led to me coming into contact.
That's pretty huge, but wow.
So I ended up connecting with a mystery school that was started by a Dogon high priest from West Africa. And I spent 3 years in that initiation. And mind you, I'm still sick, right? I'm still experiencing this sickness. And in that process, they're doing divination. They are doing readings based off of, who are you here to be in this life? And what are the problems that you're experiencing and what's the root cause? And so much of the root cause was that I was not in my purpose. I was not being who I'm here to be. And so it became very clear through those that, oh, you're here to be a priestess, you're here to be a spiritual teacher, a shaman, etc. And lots of interesting details then led to me finishing initiation in South Africa, where I completed 7 ceremonies, became Makhosi, and now I'm here. Fast forward.
Wow, that's just so huge. I want to unpack just a little bit because we could just go for hours on each point that you're talking about. But I want to know a little bit about becoming a shaman in an Egyptian mystery school. What were some of the things that they taught you? Like, what were some of the core concepts, if you're even allowed to talk about them?
Yeah, so there's some things that I'm allowed to talk about. So I think the first misunderstanding that happens is that we think like ancient Egypt was, number one, a very limited place, and that it doesn't exist anymore. And the truth that I learned is, number one, it was not called ancient Egypt, it was Kemet, right?
Yes.
But also a few key points. Number one, it is essentially African spirituality. Like the people who were in those temples, many of them migrated because first the Greeks and the Romans were invading, then you had Arabs invading, right? So a lot of those tribes, not all of them, some of them are still there, but a lot of the tribes moved down west, down into South Africa, etc. So in order to preserve themselves, many of them left and then took the knowledge and hid in the African bush. And a lot of things are actually hidden kind of in plain sight, because if you don't know what to look for, then people think that, African spirituality is it's demonic, or it's uncivilized, all of these things that essentially keep us from seeing truth. But the other key thing that was really interesting was to understand that we meaning all of humanity, at a point in time in history, in fact, for most of our human history, we had a universal spirituality. We had one common spiritual paradigm that was expressed multiculturally, depending on where you lived, right? So the nature where you lived would influence how you experienced that spiritual paradigm, right? And this spiritual paradigm essentially is animism, right? It is the understanding that everything has consciousness, that there are many layers to this dimension, and that we can interact with those forces. And our goal as humans is to be in harmony with nature, to be in harmony with these forces that are extremely delicate, to maintain a homeostasis on this plane. And so what we call ancient Egypt was essentially the capital of the worldwide spirituality.
Yes,
Okay.
I've heard this, but in different ways. But this is huge.
Right. So this is why we see so many common threads with ancient spiritual systems. It's why, you can look at Mayan and Aztec spirituality and see commonalities with ancient Egyptian spirituality. Or you can look at, various Asian spiritual systems and also see these connections. And you can look in all sorts of, Celtic and there's just so many commonalities. The reason is because we had one spiritual system. And what this allowed for was a greater level of connection between us, because we weren't fighting to be right as it related to spirit.
Right.
We understood we all had our different perspectives, and depending where you live, you might eat different things, you might interact with different spirits, you might have different ways. And so you would be able to travel to a different place and just immerse yourself in the culture, because you had the common spiritual.
Yeah, there was no judgment. There was no judgment. There was no my way is the right way, that way is the wrong way. It was just knowing it was a different expression. They all had the common spirituality, like you're saying, but you could go from region to region and understand that it was just a different expression without putting a negative judgment on it.
Yeah. So now we fought over other things.
True.
Because humans be humaning, and it wasn't perfect. But essentially that was one of the most important things. So in my first initiation, you could say that was the initiation, really just back into myself. And so at the end of that initiation, you have to show initiation is not like education here, where you just learn information. You have to actually become. So it's more about who you become, how you transform in the process. And once you've demonstrated a certain level of embodiment, that's when you're able to graduate.
Wow.
And I will also share with you, it's a very difficult process. I entered with 9 people. Within just a couple months, I was the only one, and it took me 3 years to graduate.
Wow.
Okay. Initiation's very, very hard. And it covered everything from, understanding like spiritual movement, what's called Kat EB, or essentially Kemetic yoga, understanding spiritual practices like cleansing and connecting with ancestors. Also understanding like our ancestral paradigm, like how our ancestors understood reality and the mysteries of the universe. And coming out of that initiation was when I received the name Makhosi Nejeser. Okay. So Makhosi Nejeser is a Kemetic or ancient Egyptian name. written in hieroglyphic language. Because, oh, yes, we also had to learn how to speak and write in hieroglyphs.
Whoa.
I'm not a master at it, just to be clear. But we had to do all of our prayers and meditations and chants in the hieroglyphic Kemetic language. And so Hafisa means the god Sa or the god Sia watches over. And the god Sa has to do with essentially, it's a very difficult concept to explain, but it has to do with divine timing of all things, all knowingness, the ability to, like, omniscience, the ability to see all.
Okay.
And Nejeser means the protector or advocate of the holy. So
that's a huge title.
Yeah. You don't receive your name until the actual graduation ceremony, so you don't know. And then I knew what Nejeser meant. And so when I received that name, I was like shocked. And I'm like, that's a heavy responsibility.
I was just going to say that.
Like, can I get something like free angel, right? Something.
But during that process, at what point did you notice like dramatic frequency shifts where you felt your internal core frequency really becoming something different? And then at the end of it, was it even more different than those stages?
Yeah, it didn't take long for me to start to feel the shifts, and my gifting really started to come on board. So that was when my gift of sight really started to pick up within, I would say, 6 months to a year. My ability to see the non-physical realm, similar to how you would experience on plant medicine, is similar to how I see. And my dreams would be absolutely insanely accurate with very specific details, which got me in trouble sometimes. I had to learn how to like rein in certain things. But it was a really difficult time. You know, it sounds fun, but it was not. It was, for 2 years solid, I thought my husband and I were not going to make it as a couple because I was going on a trajectory that was so different than what any of us had ever seen. And of course, with my family, there was so much misunderstanding about what I was doing and who I was becoming and like, what is the point of all of this? And, part of that was part of the journey, And
you're saying it was kind of hard for your family because they're still kind of in that same frequency that they're in, their life, their patterns, their habits. And here you are blossoming, having these huge frequency shifts, taking on actually this other role, your true role, but now it's activation time. It's happening. And it was hard for them to process.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you do something that is outside of the status quo, it's going to be judged.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's going, they loved me, but I'll never forget there was a period where we had to live with my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother passed just a few years ago, actually. And we were living with her. And at the time I was fasting. So we would do like a 10-day fast. And she saw me fasting and I would be wearing all white and, cleansing and in meditation and all of these things. And I'll never forget. She just started crying. She's like, what is happening? I'm afraid you're going to go to hell. I'm afraid you're going to hell. And I was like, okay, well, let me pull, because in the mystery schools, everything is really based off of like these 77 commandments. A lot of people have heard of like the 42 laws of Ma'at. Those are part of the 77 commandments. And so I pulled those out for my great-grandmother. And I was like, I want you to read these and understand that in my spirituality, there isn't this concept of like, do whatever you want and all is forgiven. It's that everything that we do has a consequence. It has an impact. And we have to be mindful of that. And so I'm reading these with her, and, some of them are like, thou shalt not cause crying, or thou shalt not poison waters, right? Like, very, of course, thou shalt not kill, and on and on and on are part of it, right? But I asked her, I was like, if you saw a person who was trying to live by these 77 commandments, which are way more than 10, which was what she was following, right? Way more than 10. Would you say that I am going to be a good person by trying to live by these? And she said, yes. And I said, well, what kind of God would deny me heaven if I'm following this and I'm doing so in a much more disciplined manner than how people follow the 10 commandments? And she had nothing to say.
Exactly. And again, that's a product of programming. It's a product of paradigms. The Judeo-Christian paradigm, this Bible, yes, there's universal truths, morals, and ethics in all great religious texts, but the dogma, and people get really caught up in that. Really,
at this point, I didn't go into it with as much compassion, but I do now hold so much compassion because they're held so much in fear. They're not able to explore and expand and question things because there is so much fear about what might happen to them, right? And that was kind of the hardest part. But if we fast forward some years, and my family witnessing me then, because I was traveling back and forth to Africa, and then I go and I initiate and become what's called a Sangoma. It's essentially a Zulu shaman in South Africa. And I come back, and now I'm Makhosi. I've received that title, and I start doing my work. It's so interesting. Like, just a few years ago, like, I've facilitated plant medicine experiences for my whole family.
Oh my God. Wow. That's kind of a transformation. Holy God.
Total. Even my grandmother. Okay. Now, my great grandmother, which I was telling you about, she did end up passing, but I did facilitate an experience for my mom and my grandmother, and also my brother.
And what substances exactly are we talking about?
So in 2020, I started initiating with an indigenous Mexican shaman. I have some Mexican and Native American lineage in there somewhere, and was guided to interact with psilocybin. So I facilitated with psilocybin. Nice. I've facilitated for some years now. And that was like amazing to be able to hold that kind of space for my family after years of this
ridicule.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't
just the energetic kind of, the vibe. It's just like this kind of distortion, and now it's harmonized.
Yeah. Well, part of it was my fault. Like, full transparency, if you're listening to this, the one thing that we have to be careful of, especially if we are, in our early stages of awakening, is spiritual ego. And because I was having all of these revelations, and I'm like, everyone needs to know these things and everyone needs to wake up. And oh my gosh, like, the world would be so different if people just saw things the way I did. And I was projecting onto my family of how I thought they should be. I thought, I was like, my husband needs to be spiritual like me. And my family needs to know XYZ. And, now I understand everybody has their own path. And as long as we don't, criticize and hurt one another because of how we perceive reality, things are great. I even had my grandmother, we were talking about this, and we talk about spirituality, and she's like super conservative Christian. Okay. Very conservative Christian. I have Amish Mennonites in my family.
Right. I remember reading about this.
I do. I have Amish Mennonite family members. And so we were sitting having a conversation, and my grandmother said to me, she said, if I wasn't so old, this could be something I might be interested in exploring. But at this point, I feel like it's too old. I'm too old to look back now, right? And I'm like, you know what? Who knows how many more years that she has? Deconditioning and deprogramming is hard.
Very
right?
much so.
It's so hard. And so I'm like, she's going to come back around. And when she comes back, maybe next lifetime, she'll have the opportunity.
Yeah, because she'll be carrying that frequency of wonder and wanting that, but then feeling like she couldn't go there. But then when she goes to that next dimension and has that assessment and looks at her life, she's going to be like, oh my God, I want to do that next life. This is what I want to choose. And I'd like to point out also, a lot of these quote unquote ultra conservative people like you're talking about, the very Christian people, Jesus was like the most magical, psychedelic, hippie Jewish guy that actually lived in ancient Egypt. See, we talk about this. We talk about how we're reincarnated Egyptians. If you believe that Jesus was an actual person, I do. There's a lot of mythology and different things pinned onto the story, but I actually believe there was a person. He was the most magical person out there. He was living in Egypt, 18 to 30, had an epiphany, dialed it in, had some downloads, and took on that consciousness. I think that's so funny because so many of people that are in that frequency, that mindset, really condemn things that we're talking about. But yet the person, their guru, their avatar of spirituality is one of the most
does not make
psychedelic. It's super funny. It's super funny, but it's also showing us how strange this planet is. I often like to step back and really just step back and look at our planet, our behavior culturally, individually, as if you're an extraterrestrial. How would you perceive that information? And it's really strange. It's really strange how humans have developed these different ways to process spirituality and the spiritual experience over lifetimes. It's just so weird. It blows the mind. It just blows my mind.
It does. And at some point, sometimes I get some judgment because I have a lightheartedness about all of this. And that seems crazy to some people who their only perception of what a spiritual, I'm basically everything the opposite of what people think a spiritual teacher is. And part of the reason for that is like, you can't look at us and not see some kind of like cosmic joke, right? Like this,
of course,
whole thing kind of has some humor.
A lot of humor, I would say. Look, I often tell people the divine experience can be fun and funny. Like we take it so seriously. It's like all these big energies, angelic energies, galactics, all of that. It's fine, but always maintain that sense of humor because, again, the divine can be fun and funny. It's all a big cosmic joke, like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I got my first experience with that the first time that I went over to Africa, and we're like in the midst of these, very sacred experiences, and the priests are just like cracking jokes and as like part of it, right? And so I asked about that. I'm like, what is up with that, right? And yeah, there's a lot. There's so much to really being able to have a lightheartedness about,
yes.
And we can be serious and also humorous.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's the most approachable frequency, approachable vibration, especially as a teacher. If you're rigid, if your auric field's kind of crunchy and maybe you have like a little bit of that spiritual ego that you were talking about, you're not going to attract the people that you're trying to help. But having that lightheartedness, that love, because honestly it's rooted in love, that lightheartedness, that openness, that attracts more people to you. And then you're doing the work. That's your service. That's your whole intention as a teacher. So it's a good thing. It's a very, very good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially the archetype of, the sacred joker or the sacred trickster, where there's, and even comedians have some of that magic where, when you approach things from the lens of humor, from lightheartedness, it's such a powerful medicine to alchemize very heavy, dense things,
Yes.
right? If you can find the humor in things, that's why I have such an affinity for comedy. It's one of my absolute favorite things, favorite pastimes. I feel like we need more of that, right? Like we need more people who are able to, talk about like what's uncomfortable. I talk about so many in my teachings. Money is usually one of the things that people love to talk about with me, because I have zero. I won't say zero. Maybe there's some shadows that I still have going on with money, but money, sex, like all the taboo things to talk about. There's a lot to being able to move through those and really transmute that energy.
Yes, without resistance, and spiritualize those things. Sex, human intercourse has always been a spiritual experience. It's just certain humans really materialized it in certain situations. But money, spiritual people have a problem with. And this is kind of a segue into something I wanted to ask you about. What are some of the things you're teaching people? Are you teaching people to switch out of scarcity, get into abundance, attract more into their lives? What are some of the things you talk about when you're teaching people directly?
Yeah, money it tends to be a very core conversation that I have repeatedly with people, because I find that lack around money shows up even when you have money.
I know.
A lot of people think, oh, if you have money, then you don't have any lack. But let's be honest. If we look at the level of like corporate greed that's happening in our societies in the West, I think it's very clear that there's a lot of lack mentality. Like when you think that your $25 million a year bonus is not enough, that's still rooted in lack mentality, right?
It's just shifted up. I mean, it's just the numbers are different, but the energy, the frequency is the same.
Right. And so I do end up talking a lot about wealth, about money, about what abundance actually is, because people think abundance equals money, and that's not the same. Because people have this idea, which keeps us stuck in the 3D, where, oh, if I just had more money, then all of my things would be all my problems would be gone. Or if we didn't have money, then all our problems would be gone. Or the spiritual people who absolutely resist letting themselves have money, which is a whole issue that we've got to let go of that paradigm, because this world isn't going to shift until we change our relationship with this tool called money. That's one of the most common things that I talk about and end up teaching on. But it is, I'm feeling this kind of shift happen right now, where I'm really leaning into talking more about consciousness in leadership, consciousness in business spaces, and really starting to bridge gaps. A big piece of my calling is not just to teach about quote unquote spirituality, but to see how we can merge the spiritual with the everyday, right?
Yes.
How we start to bridge the gap. And that way people can become more whole and really live to their potential. There's a lot of people who are either, I see two extremes. I see the spiritual folks who are very ungrounded and unable to create in the 3D realm, which creates a problem, because then we don't have the magical creations that spiritual people are here to bring in a very tangible way. They can't have that impact without it. And then the other piece is those who are really grounded in the 3D missing their connection with spirit. And so everything that they're building is disconnected from life force energy and ultimately ends up being lose-lose situations for all of us. So there's something to bridging.
Yes.
It's a time for bridging.
It really is. I just want to really quick just say spiritual people have a problem with money. It's changing, but the programming was so bad for so long. People didn't realize that greed was the issue. Money's just a neutral form of energy. Money can amplify and magnify the good that you do. The more of that energy that you have as a spiritual person, think of what you can manifest. It's just about directing that energy. And also the most fundamental aspect of that is the fact that everything is made out of one thing, and that one thing is infinite. Call it God, call it consciousness. It has a lot of different names. The mystery, whatever you want to call it, it's infinite and everything's made out of that. So there's no way we can run out of anything. Our needs, what we're looking for, will take new forms. It will respond to us energetically. So there's no real lack there. I think that that's pretty much the fundamental aspect, that the money can help you. Think of the good that you can do. You can attract that more. And then also, to add to what you're saying, I feel like a lot of spiritual people, they have the cut and run mentality. Like they have to go hide on an island in their own little dimension to not be in the third dimension. And sorry, the third dimension's too hard and scary and gross and weird. I'm going to be over here in my little pocket dimension and everything's perfect. However, if something breaks, there's an electrical issue, something happens, you're back dealing with the matrix. The real work of the light workers, I believe, and the spiritual people is what you're saying, bridging, bringing the knowledge, the consciousness, God into what the humans have created, because what the humans have created, it was all inspirational. It was given to us through inspiration being defined. Some human somewhere or a group of humans asked for knowledge, received that knowledge, and invented something. So the matrix, this whole universe that we created, isn't necessarily bad. It came through inspiration. We just need to now bring that the original spiritual information back into this creation, this matrix that we've created, to evolve it. And we're going to find out afterwards, after we integrate that bridging, that was all part of the process. And that's how it shows up.
Yeah, I think, so many of the things that those of us who are spiritual really want to run away from, or at least at some point wanted to. I don't have the experience of wanting to run anymore.
Me neither. I'm embracing it.
I love being here.
This is where the work is.
Amazing. This is a wild video game. But so much of what we want to run away from is just a reflection of our collective consciousness, right? And so it's not until those of us who become aware, those of us who awaken, actually start to build in this 3D realm that we are going to see things change.
Right.
The government's not going to come and save us. The corporations are not structured to save us, right? It's going to be those of us who awaken. There are conscious companies who are doing great work, but also on an individual level. I think a lot of people don't understand how change happens. I'll use an example.
Okay.
I grew up in small town Southern West Virginia, where I wouldn't say it's like reached full food desert status, but there's like a McDonald's on every other corner. Okay. Horrible food. West Virginia is known for the levels of obesity.
And the name of the town is Nitro, right? Isn't that correct?
Yeah. I grew up in Nitro.
I've never heard of such a town. I was like, Nitro, really?
Yeah, small town. Listen, Nitro was where Monsanto created nitro.
Oh, okay. My God. I figured something like that was happening, but wow.
Yes. So lots of chemicals, and we wonder why I was sick, right? Very interesting thing to think about. But
sure.
I remember when I was much younger going into the grocery store, and I would go. So my Amish Mennonite aunt would come, and she had like a lot of allergies to things, and we would go into the natural health section. And at that time, I don't remember what age I was, probably like 13 or 14. But we go into the grocery store and the quote unquote natural food, the organic section was tiny. Like it wasn't even a whole aisle at that point. Okay. Now I will go back home to my hometown and I'll go in the same store. And what was once not even a full aisle is now multiple aisles and like a freezer section, right?
Yeah, that's good.
It's good, right? And so most of us can see that progression. The reason why that happens is people became aware of XYZ chemicals in their food, hormones being pumped into it, XYZ, right? All the things. And then they took their money and then bought what they wanted. And this signals to companies, hey, this is in demand. We need to create more of this. So we've got to start seeing, I see money as like a vote.
Yes.
Every time we spend $1, we are making a vote for the future that we want to experience. Now, yes, are there certain things we don't get a whole lot of control over, like taxes? Yes, that's a thing. And we kind of have to put our dollars into taxes, but also with the ones that we have free reign in, right? If you have more money, what are you doing? You are tipping better. You are, you're investing in acupuncture and supplements and, really great treatments for your body. You are taking better care of the land. You are, putting your money where your mouth is. And so that's why we need more people who are spiritual to have more money. It's not just for the quote unquote philanthropy, but how you live your life, right? Like when you have no choice, what do you end up buying for clothing? You go to Shein, which is really awful. Like I have zero judgment if that's someone's experience where all they can afford is Shein, but that paradigm is creating a lot of environmental harm. It's creating, it's essentially like some slavery happening.
Yes, and they're toxic products. They leach the clothes, everything.
Everything, right? It's making us sick. And then that leaches into our water and on and on and on, right? However, if you have money and you have the choice, now you can buy sustainable things. Like my favorite thing is to buy things custom from one person who made that for me, right? And I know where it's coming from. It's made to fit my body. I know what the fabrics are and we can't do that if we don't allow ourselves to receive. And then those people are taken care of better, right? People who otherwise, what would they end up doing? Not their gift, that's for sure.
Well, yes. You need to manifest abundance. All people can because everything's infinite, but to do the spiritual work, you need to be able to have your own backing, back yourself, back your own ideas. It's all infinite and you can attract as much into your life as you want. You just have to get in harmony with it and change your frequency. And you're helping, you're amplifying yourself. Like we were talking about earlier, it magnifies the mind. Money magnifies the mind. And really, when you're out there making big impacts, like you're saying, that's when the change happens. And it aids in manifestation. It's a manifestation tool. And I'd like you to talk about that a little bit because so many people talk about this concept of manifestation. And we do talk about it a lot on the show. But what does it mean to you? Like when somebody asks you, what is manifestation and how does a person manifest something? What would you tell them?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the misunderstanding with manifestation is there is this idea that it just means like stuff just appears. To me, to manifest is to create.
Yes.
It is to be a conscious creator because the fact of the matter is that we are always creating. We are always contributing to our reality. We are always doing that. But manifestation is a process of bringing more consciousness, more awareness to that process. And a big component of that is developing deeper levels of self-awareness around our energy and also our actions, how we are behaving, the things that we are deciding. so on and so forth. I also think that my biggest pet peeve with conversations around manifestation, because there are higher truths that are true. However, there are dimensions of truth, meaning certain things that are true at the highest level aren't always the most helpful at lower dimensions, like a human dimension. So one of the things that I see taught in manifestation is the idea that you create your reality. And this is empowering at first, because if you believed your whole life that you were a victim and that everything was just happening to you, all of a sudden now you start tapping into, oh no, wait, actually I have power, I have say in here, right? That is a powerful concept, but it also leaves out a big piece that our ancient and indigenous practices knew and understood. And is that, yes, you create your reality, but we co-create our reality. Okay?
Absolutely.
We are doing this together, right? So sometimes it can cause a lot of bypassing around systematic issues, war, genocide, famine, etc. Because if you think like, well, I create my reality, they create their reality, they created that reality. We are creating this reality.
It's one mind, it's one energy.
Okay, we are doing that. And as spiritual people, that can be really hard to accept. Like, we are, when we see something happening in our external reality, that is also part of us and a reflection, right? We are doing this together. And so the reason I bring that up is because I think it's so important that we get to a place where manifestation is not just about what can I get? What kind of car can I get? What kind of house can I manifest? Like, all of that is great and it's fine. I love a fabulous house. I'm not super into cars. I drive a Telluride, but I love it. So like, that's cool. But also that we start to realize like, oh, we also are manifesting systemic issues. We also are manifesting an education system. We also are manifesting all of these things. And when we become aware of what we have collectively manifested and also how that has impacted us, then we become even more powerful creators to make change, to actually create impact, right? Like, yes. A great example of this, when I was in my first business in sales, and I live, again, small town, Southern West Virginia, racism was like an regular occurrence in my life, okay? And I was somehow able to get to the top of my company. I was one of the top in my state, in a very racist state. And I will tell you, I was the only brown girl who was in the top. And the reason that I was able to do that was because I was able to accept racism, that was going to, like, it was part of what I was experiencing. But I didn't have to see that as a limitation, right? I think sometimes in manifestation, we try and bypass certain realities. But if we instead allow ourselves to accept and recognize what is, but not be limited or identified by it, not make it mean I can't experience blank, or I can't make a change there, or I can't have an impact. No, it doesn't have to mean that. It just means that you might have to I'm a brown girl. I have to make moves differently. Like, I had to go out and build a 7-figure business to be taken seriously. Okay. That was part of my experience because of how things are perceived, right? But if I just focused on everything is amazing, everything is perfect all the time, and I just ignored like the reality of how people perceive me, what the judgments are, I probably wouldn't be here right now.
Right. And you didn't ignore it, you're saying. You didn't ignore it. You didn't pretend like it wasn't there, but you didn't give it power, but you did acknowledge it and integrated it in a way that allowed you to manifest that what you wanted, because that was reality. That was real. What was happening, what you were experiencing was real. You didn't pretend like it wasn't there. You didn't condone it, obviously, but you just worked with what was there to make yourself what you are now, which is so huge. And I'm sorry that humanity is like in this weird place where we still haven't realized we're all just like light beings in these physical bodies, and we're the universal family of living light. And there's really no difference between any of us, age, gender, anything, because we're just that living light. I'm sorry people haven't figured that out yet. It sucks. Like that's the shit that really annoys me.
It does. It's very annoying sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, why? I'm like, if I could just be like an old man, I'm like, things would be so much easier as a spiritual teacher if I could just be like an old man.
Sure, but I love you how you are, and how you are is exactly how you should be. That's why
I had to be this, right? Like I chose to be this. I chose to be fabulous. I chose to be, young and a woman. We haven't seen, there are very few well-recognized women as spiritual teachers. And we don't have many women who have been recognized as prophets, right? And so what are we going to see in this time? We are going to see more women. We are going to see more diversity. We are going to see all of those things. And it's perfect. Like, yes, we need that. But in the meantime, someone like me gets to navigate not only the limited perception of like 3D, but also I get it from spiritual people too, because they're like, you're a shaman. You should not be visible. You've got to be
No, it's time to do the work. Right? I hear that a lot from other spiritual people as well. It's just time to do the work, people. It's time to engage and interface with the third dimension. This whole concept of the lower frequency people are here and the higher frequency people are here. Like, forget all that. It's time to do the work, because honestly, I want to get back to something you said earlier. We're co-creating our reality in real time. The matrix, this third dimensional reality, the multidimensional reality, we're mapping it with our collective consciousness in real time. And here's the thing. I believe that if we can get a hold of that power, that co-creative power, collectively, we can manifest any world that we want. If we really get a hold of that power, we can take this dimension, this earth that we're on, and make it the best possible place. We can make this place a heaven on earth. Not that we're going to be free from emotional conflict, but just together, a united earth, one human family. We can get there by realizing these things.
Yeah, for sure. I love the term heaven on earth, because ultimately, like, for me, that's the vision, is for us. Like, we can create that here. This doesn't have to be a hellhole.
No, we have the power. This is our co-creative power. There are forces that are manipulating through programming and subconscious programming that co-creative power. We have to reject the subconscious programming that we do not want. We have to accept that we have this power as humans co-creating this reality. We accept that, and then we have it. We can make it beautiful. And also part of that, I believe, is us realizing as humans that, again, we are that light being. We're living lights. We're like in this vehicle, but we should put our consciousness there. We're the living light first, everything else second, human, everything. But that light, it unites us. It unites all life. And also, I just like to say that what you're doing is really helping people achieve that, because when people set goals, whether they have emotional goals, they want to have a good relationship, financial goals, spiritual goals, when people set these goals, they're starting a business, they want a multinational business, they want those 7 figures. There's another goal that should always be the overarching goal. You may have these goals, these plateaus, but the overarching goal is creating heaven on earth. All of our works, all of our goal setting should be rooted in that understanding. So every time we make a leap and we get to a new place, we know that we're doing that in service to the divine, to help humanity finally raise our frequency, raise our vibration, come together. What do you think about that?
Yeah. And I would also say that the way that we build heaven on earth is allowing ourselves to have heaven now.
Yes.
Right. And so many of us think like, oh, once I get there, once I create that legacy, once I create that big thing, then I'll be able to do X, Y, Z. And it's more about how can this is the one, big thing that I've learned in my journey, especially as an entrepreneur, is how can I build things in such a way where I am experiencing the desires that I deeply have now before I even get to the goal. So it's not the goal that creates the emotional state that I want. It is allowing myself to experience the emotional state that I want and creating from that, right? So instead of thinking once I have the money, then I will be free, it's no, how can I give myself permission to experience freedom right now? And that is an emotional experience. That is not dependent on how much is in your account. That's not dependent on, what you have access to. It is you getting very creative in allowing yourself permission to experience that heaven now. That is what creates heaven on earth.
Because also, just to add to that, when you experience it now, when you take on that frequency, that vibration, and you act as if, then that creates a vacuum within the universe. There's a vacuum there, and the universe physically doesn't like vacuums. It abhors, nature abhors a vacuum. So it'll change its functionality through some process that we can't even really explain currently, quantum, beyond quantum. It'll change its processes to meet the vacuum because you're holding that frequency. You're taking on that freedom first. I love that.
Yeah. It's, I can't explain all of the amazing things that can happen when we go about creating our lives in this way. But I've just seen it happen so many times. I ran a challenge, an abundance alchemy challenge last year. And some of the most amazing things happened. Like I had one person, it was a free challenge, by the way, one person who manifested her first 6-figure client, right? I had another person, this one was really wild, she was a handy woman. And she desired to travel, and someone literally flew her to another country to come and put up pictures and do some handiwork around the house. And you can't plan for those things. You can't, you can't create a 5-year map to some of those experiences. But what you can do is tap into those frequencies now. Let yourself be happy now. Let yourself be in freedom now. Let yourself be in abundance now. And when you're creating from that state, I'm not saying that everything in your life is going to be perfect, because it's definitely, listen, we are here to have challenges.
Yes.
That is part of this video game. Okay. Boss levels happen. But also you will enjoy the ride much more. You won't be suffering in hell. You will be experiencing growth in heaven, right? And heaven's not somewhere out there. It's here now.
Yes. And this is what you teach people. These are some of the things that you teach people. And is this what you mean by the evolved euphoric millionaire? Is this what you're helping people get to that state?
Yes. So I worked with many, many millionaires and beyond who, like I said, have experienced lots and lots of wealth. And the money didn't solve the non-wealth problem.
Right. Like you were saying.
It just magnified them. It just created more. And so I realized, number one, that the medicine that both these high-level leaders needed was also the same that you need on your way to creating the millions, right? And so even if I'm not attached to everybody needing to make millions, I think more conscious people making millions is amazing. But what's more important is the alignment. It's who you're being in the process of creating the wealth and creating the empire and the legacy that you are here to create. Because it's not the money itself that allows for you to experience euphoria. That's the word that I use. It is experiencing euphoria and creating from that place that allows you to have the experience of fulfillment as you're building.
Because that euphoria feeling, it's like a laser beam almost, because you feel backed by the universe itself and you're just creating, you're loving, you're doing. Wow, that's so huge. This has been a fantastic conversation. I can't even believe how much time has gone by. I feel like we've just been locked in. This has been such a great episode. Is there anything that you feel like our audience should know that we haven't covered yet?
You know, I think the important thing is, I use the word euphoria, and I really hope that more people start to create and design their life in this state of euphoria. Most of us think of euphoria in terms of ecstasy as like a peak experience, but the original frequency of euphoria is holistic well-being. That's actually like the ancient old meaning of it. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's almost like a state of being.
It is a state of being. And when we pay attention to, okay, what is my euphoria? When am I in flow states, right? What activities am I doing? Who am I being in those moments? That is a guiding star, right? When we follow what is truly in alignment for us, that is when we will create what is in the highest good, not only for ourselves, and create the aligned abundance. And I'm saying that specifically because aligned abundance, like I have my best friend, aligned abundance for her was like chickens. Right? Like, she's like, Makhosi, I don't like actually care about being a millionaire. Like, I want a plot of land and like chickens. And I'm like, listen, that's legit. It's not going to look the same for everyone.
Right.
But it is tapping into that now and giving yourself permission to experience that more and more, and really asking yourself, like, how good am I willing to allow it to be?
Yes, because again, aligned abundance is just being in a state of loving what you're doing, like that euphoria. And you can move that around. You can transmute that energy to help you manifest all kinds of different things, including millions. But again, it could be like your friend. She just wanted that farm, those chickens, but she was able to do that with those same techniques.
Exactly. So I think that this conversation that we have had today is like the perfect example of being in euphoria. For me, yes. I have no idea how long we've been talking, kind of lost sense of time. But paying attention to what are those things that you're doing when you do lose sense of time, when you transcend time, and when you are, I'm not in the past thinking about things, and I'm not in the present worried about what's coming. I'm really here. And I do these because this is my euphoria, right? And when we build businesses from that place, when we build families from that place, when we invest in hobbies and activities from that place, we are in spirit. Like, that is when we are in alignment. And can you just imagine what the world would look like if we were even just like a fraction more creative in spirit. Like
I think about it quite a bit because I try to visualize that heaven on earth world. But yeah, we'd be a way different place.
Totally different. We wouldn't be in a lot of our situations. So,
but all spiritual teachers, I would say, are talking about that coming. Like, we're getting that information. It's people like us, like yourself, doing these podcasts, getting your energy out there, other people as well, to help us all ascend, to make that bigger shift happen. Like, we're doing it. It's happening.
It's happening. It's done.
We're
done. Just playing it out.
Yes. That's actually really true. It's already happened. It's outside of time. You step outside of time, it's already happened. We're just part of the process. Even the people listening and integrating this information are part of the process.
Yeah.
Because we're truly all one. Wow. Oh my God. Makhosi, this has been such an incredible episode. Look, people, if you're listening to this and you're feeling that euphoria, that riveting connection that we have, take the deep dive. Check out what Makhosi has to offer. Her website is theroyalshaman.com. So www.theroyal, ROYAL, shaman, SHAMAN.com, The Royal Shaman. She has a podcast. We love podcasts. She has a podcast, Euphoric Evolution. Love the name. She does personal one-on-one sessions. People, if you're loving this again and you want to work with her directly, you can go to her website. She has one-on-one sessions where she'll coach you, she'll guide you directly. She'll be working on your life directly. And of course, she's on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, The Royal Shaman. Whoa, thank you so much for being here, Makhosi. This has been incredible.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been expansive for sure. And, you know, it's always fun to see what ripple effects happen. So if anyone listening wants to share, I would love to hear, you know, what your insights or aha moments or takeaways were. That's always like the best little gift in my inbox.
Yes, I get those constantly, and it's very invigorating. It's very supportive. You just feel that charge from other humans gaining some sort of spiritual growth. It's like, wow, you feel so humble and amazing. Yes, send her an email, and her email's on the website, Instagram. Send her an Instagram message after you listen to this episode. Tell her what you thought. Thank you so much for being here. This has been, again, incredible.
Thank you again.
All right. Well, please hold through the outro music, theroyalshaman.com. This has been such a good episode. We stepped outside of time. We connected. We were friends in Egypt. We were so close, and here we are back again. And we'll see you guys next week. Midnight on Earth.